Policing, off the top of your head, a moment that you were really scared for your life.
We're in North Melbourne. I'm working undercover and there's this man and he's holding this little girl, holding her hand, and there's lots and lots of yelling, and the man in the middle is Victor Pearce. He's just been acquitted 2 days prior. Is this a setup? Because the North Melbourne flats, that's where a number of the suspects lived. I actually thought that we were going to be shot from above.
Body in the boot case of Maria Korp.
Joe has told us the marriage was happy, but then we find that he's been on the internet looking for threesomes.
Yep.
And he happened to have found a threesome with a woman called Tanya. Probably 80 metres away, we could smell it. You would know there is a smell about a dead body that is hard to describe, but
Yep.
it is unmistakable. And
Yep.
when we opened the boot, it was just like a wave of this horrendous smell. And there's little Maria. Somebody had to get in to make sure that she was dead. I just did it without thinking. You know, Gary, like, you just don't think. I get in and I sort of get myself around so that I'm almost spooning her. She had blood coming from her ears. I thought I'll just make 100%, 110% sure. So somehow I managed to get it so that my head was, I could see her chest. I couldn't believe it, but her chest just moved ever so slowly up and down. Oh my God, she's alive.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers. Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with retired Victorian Police Detective Narelle Fraser. If you listened to part 1, you heard some, I got to say, Narelle, pretty heavy stuff. But that is the nature of the work. But you also heard about Narelle talking the way that she went about her investigations and the compassion and the empathy she had. And when we're talking about victims of serious crimes, we're not making light in any way of the nature of these crimes. This is the world of crime, and this is what we talk about on the I Catch Killers. And the consequences when someone's life is taken, it's not just the person whose life's taken, it's the amount of people around them. It escalates, doesn't it? It's not just the victim or the immediate family, it's the friends, it's generational, it just passes on. So,
And you know, in saying that, I do feel like, let's say John Sharp, you know, his mum and dad and his family were the innocent, innocent victims in all this. And I never want to take away from the fact that they have suffered as well. But, you know, it's not their fault as to what John did, and they must feel, I imagine, terrible shame.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying. And also just another thing, when I was talking before about being euphoric, I do think sometimes, I feel like I have to justify that, and you did very well, but just to say, as a detective, when you put 24/7, like months into a job, an investigation, and you find the evidence that you're looking for, you do feel like everything else goes away, because you are just so rapt that you've found what you're looking for, even if that is a body. It sounds terrible, but so I don't want people to think, you know, you're euphoric finding a body, you know.
Narelle, what you're saying to me, I fully understand. I think, we're trying to take people into the world of crime, and they might look and go, what are these two idiots talking about? Do they have any comprehension? That you spent 27 years in the police. That's how you survive that. You've got to focus. You've got to have the highs and lows. And I always give people, sometimes when we're talking about this, sometimes the victims see highs and lows. Like I've dealt with the families of murdered victims, and they've got to find some joy. And I won't say joy in a strange sort of way, but they've got to be able to laugh at situations. Otherwise, it's just too dark. And I think police, when you've been doing policing for a long time, you got to take the good. You got to take the good moments and enjoy it. You'll go home after feeling euphoric, and I've been there. I've been there where a case is cracked and you've got the breakthrough you need, and you're all high-fiving each other and you're running around. When you get back to your home and you sit there and think about what has gone on, That's when it hits you, when you're laying there at night going, or you're getting up the next day, getting ready to go to work, and you've got to face this horror. So I think people understand. So you don't have to apologise, and I think that people listen to it in totality, understand exactly where you're coming from. I'm just going to change direction very quickly. Policing. Off the top of your head, a moment that you were really scared for your life. Because most people have spent long enough in police that there's a time when you have that, oh shit, what's going to happen here?
It'd have to be to do with the Walsh Street. Well, I don't know if they were convicted in the end when a guy called Victor Pearce.
Yeah.
Victor Pearce was part of the Carlton gang, Carlton crew. He'd been acquitted with 3 others of the Walsh Street murders. And 2 days after that, of course, Victoria Police were just devastated. It was a pretty difficult time to be in the job. And so they get acquitted. And 2 days later, I'm working undercover, just doing some, we used to call them special duties, where you're in plain clothes and you're just driving around, assisting the uniform members or, looking for drug deals and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, we're in North Melbourne and there's a call across the radio to say that there's a man that's being held by a Vietnamese storeholder, a milk bar owner, under the North Melbourne flats. They were housing commission flats. And nobody was available to do this job. And so myself and my 2 colleagues, we came up on the radio and said, it was a theft of a jar of coffee, I think. And, look, we'll do that, that's easy. So anyway, we drive up and we see this man, and he is surrounded by probably 20 Vietnamese. And the milk bar was under the flats. So it's outside on the sort of forecourt, just outside the milk bar. And there's this man, and he's holding this little girl holding her hand, and there's lots and lots of yelling. And anyway, as we walk towards what's going on, we all realise the man in the middle is Victor Pearce. He's just been acquitted 2 days prior.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God. And I can remember thinking, is this a setup? Because the North Melbourne flats, that's where a number of the suspects lived.
Yeah.
One of them lived up in the north, 1 or 2 lived up in the flats. So I actually thought that we were going to be shot from above.
Just calling you in. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember just wanting to get out of the forecourt and underneath the milk bar. Anyway, look, we eventually did. We got under there, and we ended up charging him. We got him. He was acquitted for the Walsh Street murders, but we got him for a theft of a jar of coffee for $2.58.
Okay, well, they got Al Capone for tax evasion, so I suppose it's a start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I remember feeling like that, and there was one other time where there was a guy taking pot shots on the top of a housing commission in Collingwood.
Yeah.
And we arrived and we didn't know where he was, and we could hear them. And I can remember hiding behind a bush and thinking, I'm gone here, because, we were just so obvious. I thought we would be. Anyway, in the end, we had our guns out and, yelling and all that sort of stuff. But that was pretty frightening. But I think Victor Pearce was the one where I thought, oh, my God, this is a setup.
You felt pretty vulnerable there. Yeah, I understand in the circumstances.
Yeah.
All right. We talked about that the case in part 1. There's another case that in the research I've done that you've been involved in, and that was I've referred it to as the body in the boot case of Maria Korp. I think that was 2005 that occurred. Yep. You were involved in that. Can you tell us your involvement in the nature of the case and what happened?
Maria Korp was married to Joe Korp. They lived in a lovely quite spacious place in Greenvale, I think it was in Victoria. And Maria hadn't picked up her son Damien after school, which was very normal. So the police were, Joe Korp actually rang the police on that night, the 9th of Feb in 2005. And Joe rang to say he was concerned about his wife. She hadn't picked up their son, and it was very unusual. Joe went to the Craigieburn police station to report this. But again, the police at Craigieburn, they just smelt a rat. There was just something not right.
Didn't add up.
No, it did not add up. But what eventually happened is that we get the job. I'm at missing persons still, and we get the job because her disappearance is out of character. So we get the job very quickly, and we interview Joe. Just what's happened. We get a statement from him. We speak to the school. We speak to the young boy. A whole lot of stuff, just normal investigative stuff. But what we find is there's a few things that start happening. Joe has told us that the marriage was happy, but then we find that he's been on the internet looking for threesomes, and he happened to have found a threesome with a woman called Tanya. We speak to Tanya, and her and Joe and Maria have had a threesome. Nothing to see here.
Yeah.
But so we smell a rat, but we do a media release and we ask if anyone sees Maria's car, because it's missing, if they see it, can they call it in? Well, on this Sunday morning, I happened to be working at St Kilda Road, and a shrine guard, the Shrine of Remembrance is just across the road from where we were working, and a shrine guard rings and says, I think I've got the car. And we say, don't touch it.
Maria's car?
Yep. Don't touch it. We'll be there in literally 5 minutes. We almost could have seen it from our window.
Yeah.
And so we raced down there, and it was that close you wouldn't get a car. Like, that's how close it was. We just virtually ran across the road.
Walked across, yep.
And anyway, we see the car, and probably 80 metres away, we could smell it. You would know there is a smell about a dead body that is hard to describe, but it is unmistakable. And we could smell it from about 80 metres, but also there was a lot of condensation inside the car, so we were, pretty sure that she was in there. Anyway, so we called in, everybody, and they're, about 20 minutes and everyone's there. But I know at the time we were considering, do we open up the boot because we might contaminate the scene?
Yeah.
So there was a bit of toing and froing, and I always felt uncomfortable about that because I wanted to get in there to make sure she was dead. But in the end, it was decided we wait for the techs, the technical guys to come. Anyway, they're there within minutes. And, of course, looking in the car, we set up a crime scene and all that sort of stuff, the crime scene tape and that. But looking in the car, she wasn't in the front. She wasn't in the back, so we knew that she would be in the hatch. Yep. It was a hatch, right?
In the back.
Yeah. So, and the smell was overpowering. Yep. And we eventually get the boot open, and I'll never forget, there was probably about 10 homicide detectives at the back of the boot. And when they opened the boot, me included, and when we opened the boot, it was just like a wave of this horrendous smell. And there's little Maria, and she's like in the fetal position, and she's a tiny little woman.
Yeah.
And she's all dishevelled, like she's got all her clothes up around her chest, and she's clearly deceased because she's decomposing. And so we, just to see her there, so helpless and so alone and almost like a frightened little animal.
Yeah.
And somebody had to get in to see if she was, to make sure that she was dead. And so I just did it without thinking. Gary, you just don't think. I just wanted to sort of comfort her, I suppose. And so I get in and I sort of get myself around so that I'm almost spooning her.
Yeah.
And because I'm looking for signs of life, obviously, but she's decomposing. So she had blood coming from her ears. And so I remember, checking for signs of life, and I couldn't find anything. So I go to the sergeant, no, look, she's dead. But just on a bit of a whim, I thought I'll just make 100%, 110% sure. So somehow I managed to get it so that my head I could see her chest.
Mm.
I couldn't believe it, but her chest just moved ever so slowly up and down.
Mm.
And I could remember thinking, yelling, oh my God, she's alive. So, of course, everyone rallies round into action. And I was going to say, I forgot to say that when we opened the boot, a number of really seasoned, one fainted, a couple was sick.
You just cut out there, so could you just take it from when we opened the boot?
Yeah. I forgot to mention that when we opened the boot, there was maybe about 10 detectives there. One of the detectives fainted.
Yep.
A couple were being sick. It was just that smell.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, it was horrendous.
Decaying flesh.
Yes, decaying. Yeah. So anyway, when I saw her little chest move up and down, it was euphoric. I wasn't euphoric, but it was like, oh my God. So everyone rallies round into action. And
Narelle, can I just, I heard the story, and I think a lot of us have done the body in the boot situation where you're opening a boot and there's a body there, and I very much know the smell, the body fluids coming out of the car. I can smell it as we talk about it.
Yeah.
But I just got to wind you back. You got in the boot. I've seen bodies in boots. We weren't sure whether they were a human body or a carcass. That's the effect it can have. You actually got in the back, the hatchback, checking signs of life, which of course you have to do. You can't make assumptions. How did you feel when you saw a chest rise? I would have jumped through the roof. It would have scared the hell out of me. What?
No, I wasn't scared. I was just I was shocked.
Yeah.
Because she was decomposing, and just the smell, as you say, of decaying flesh.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it. But then maybe in a way I was. Why would I, isn't it funny? All the signs of life, there's nothing. And then I put my head on her chest. I just, but it was shock, Gary. I just wasn't expecting it. And I remember just yelling at the top of my voice, oh my God, she's alive. I think that could have heard it 20 kilometres away. I was just so, I was shocked. And everyone else was too. And it was like, can we get the ambulance? All that sort of stuff. But absolute shock. I was last thing on earth I was expecting.
I could imagine. So the ambulance come. She didn't survive, I take it?
No, and just with the ambulance, I never ever let go. Again, I sound very fluffy and soft, but this woman is in the back of and she had all these marks around her neck.
Yeah.
And that they were bleeding as well. And so, again, just couldn't leave her. And I remember my sergeant said, don't leave her, stay with her, because we were thinking by some miracle that she might actually wake up and say, it was Joe, or whoever.
Yeah.
And so I didn't leave her. I was in the back in the ambulance with her. Anyway, we got to the hospital. and there was people waiting for us. We get into the operating room, and because everyone's, so they rip open her. Did they rip open her shirt? But I took all her clothing and everything. She never ever regained consciousness. She was in a coma for 6 months, and there were all sorts of legal issues, and the public advocate's office and representing Maria. It was, there was a lot going on, but no, she never regained consciousness.
And he was charged?
Yes. So when we found her, there was a number of detectives that wanted to put up their hand and say, I want to go and tell Joe.
Yeah.
Because we knew he was behind it. If by this stage,
I'd want to tell Joe that she's still alive too. That would have been my,
That is exactly. Yeah. So there are all these detectives wanting to be the one to say to Joe, we've found her and she's alive, But what we found out, so I will go back in a minute, but 6 months later, she passes away, never regains consciousness. And on the day of her funeral, Joe ended his life. But prior to that, Tanya, so the threesome.
The third member, yeah.
Yeah, Tanya becomes a prosecution witness, and she became a prosecution witness, to be honest, within days.
Yeah.
She realised, because Joe was blaming her and saying, she'd done it. And anyway, so she became a prosecution witness, and she was invaluable, her information. But what had happened was her and Joe fell in love, whatever you want to call it. And the only way that Joe thought that they could be together was to get rid of Maria.
Yeah.
So Joe orchestrated everything. He went and bought the balaclava for Tanya. Was the one that actually tried to strangle her.
So she was involved in it, in the actual offence.
Yeah, completely.
Right.
So her and Joe decide this is what they're going to do. So Joe goes and gets let's say the balaclava, some tape, organises a whole lot of things, but Tanya actually does the job. So he says, look, if you come around to the house at 7:10 tomorrow morning, I'll make sure the kids are in bed or whatever. And as she comes down the stairs, strangle her and put her in the back of the boot, kill her. And, and I don't think they actually thought much after the strangling. And so Tanya was very complicit. Yeah. And she says, yep, that's what this is what she did for love, Gary.
Look, I so many times, someone disappears, someone's murdered. Is it love, lust, this or that? So many times, and you would have seen it, I've seen it, it's just people that can't leave their partner, and so it's easier than facing the shame of saying, look, I don't love you anymore, and move away from the relationship, or just I want to move on with my life, end up killing their partners. And invariably the cases that I'm familiar with or personally involved in, it's the husband that's got the new girlfriend and taken out a life insurance policy on the wife, and look, the wife has just disappeared, or she drowned, or something like that. But it's just it's callous, and it just when we talk homicide, people often think there's this big conspiracy. It's people are planning and all that. Sometimes it's just for such a waste of a life for something like that.
And it was just, it's a coward's way out, as you say. People have
you said, just correct me if I'm wrong, he committed suicide?
Yep. But, it was just a coward's way out. Why didn't he have, pardon me, the balls to go up to her and say, Maria, I really like Tanya.
He went to the trouble of organising the threesome and getting that all sorted out, and then, it's going to kill the woman he married to run off with the other lady. It's just, it's disgusting.
And the sad, there's a lot of sad things in this story, but another sad thing is that all Tanya wanted was to find somebody to care for her and to love, let's say. Yeah. But she's prepared to murder for it. I think, my God.
Yeah.
But without Tanya, we never ever would have we'd never have got very far.
And sometimes, and it's always hard, these situations, but sometimes from a prosecution point of view, you've got to, I can't get everyone. If you assist prosecution and get whatever benefits come from that to solve the case. But with Tanya, what was her sentence? Do you know what she was sentenced for?
I think it was 12 years.
Okay.
And I know she's out now.
Right.
And hopefully she's
learn a lesson.
And leading a good life. This might sound bizarre, but she was actually quite a nice person. All she wanted was, some love.
I know. It's crazy, isn't it? That the things that they do for those type of emotions. Jesus, Narelle, the two cases you've talked about are pretty heavy stuff, and the involvement in it and finding bodies and just being involved in those type of investigations carry some trauma associated with it. And I want to talk about your career, that you, and I think some of the articles I've seen you be quoted on, that there's nothing to be ashamed of when you realise, look, I've had enough of this type of work. It's adding up, and I can't take it anymore, or I need a break. Do you want to tell us about your story?
I didn't realise it wasn't that easy. I fell over big time, and I wasn't expecting it. You start to think that you're invincible, and you start to think, I've had a bit on, but maybe I'm just a bit tired. I didn't lose interest. I was going full bore until those 1,700 videos. That was in May of 2012.
Yeah.
So all this has been building up, obviously, over the years. I've got no idea that I am very, very sick mentally, but.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I just thought, I'd do this stuff that, every now and then it gets a bit rough. And
people close to you notice something was going on?
No.
You hide it, you hid it from them?
We're pretty good, aren't we, Gary, at hiding things, and that's exactly.
I deny that allegation.
I thought you might.
Yeah.
But I didn't know myself.
Yeah.
What was happening, so I don't know how other people could. But, I often look back and I think if somebody would have said to me, anybody, and this is why I want to talk about mental illness, about stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, which was what I was diagnosed with, it is nothing to be ashamed of. It's just we've got to stop this stigma about mental illness, because what happened to me, I watched all this is happening, and then I watched those 1,700 videos, and then a couple of days later I was required, I was an informant in a court case. An informant, it's a committal. It's pretty important stuff, and
I've got to go there and give evidence, and you'll be cross-examined.
Witnesses and exhibits and all that sort of stuff. And I remember this particular morning, I've been feeling a bit tired. I'm not sleeping well. And again, you make excuses. I don't know what's going on. And so this particular morning, I'm trying to get this 16-year-old girl to come to court to give evidence against a father and a son who had raped her.
Yep.
And she was, she wouldn't come. I had to get her to court, because if I don't get her to court, I don't have a case.
Yeah.
I eventually get her there, and she's in the witness box. And she is being hammered by the defence, just hammered. And she was really distressed. And I can remember thinking, the last thing I remember is thinking, pardon me, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And I am responsible for this.
Yeah.
The next thing I remember is being across the road at a coffee shop, across the road from the court. And the court staff come over, and they see me there, and Narelle, what are you doing here? And I remember thinking, I'm having a coffee, and they said, Narelle, the magistrate's looking for you, prosecution, defence, there's witnesses, like, what are you doing here? And the magistrate was filthy because I couldn't be found. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing here? I'm in the middle of a court case. I'm the informant, and I'm in fucking la-la land in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll come straight over. Gee, and I remember the prosecutor, she was from the OPP, and she went like this to me and she said, don't you ever do that to me again, because I'd humiliated her and she'd obviously, been berated.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I went home that night and I remember thinking to myself, why was I in the coffee shop? I just couldn't work out. Anyway, what had happened was I found out later, I'd lost 20 minutes.
Right, just blacked out.
I had this, not blacked out as such, but I'd had an amnesia event where I was functioning. I was walking across the road and all that, but my mind had just said, no, enough. So that's when I thought, think maybe I'd better start, doing something. There's something not right. And I held on for 4 months thinking I can do this.
Yeah.
But no. Anyway, I went to the doctor and I remember leaving work the Friday night and I went to the doctor the Monday morning. I never went back.
That was
because I realised, it took me a long time to accept, because the doctor said to me, I've got a feeling you might have PTSD. And I actually said to him, what's that? I had no idea.
Yeah.
But as he started to explain it, I remember I was thinking to myself, yep, I've felt that. Yep, I've done that. Yep. And it probably took me, and I never went back because the psychologist said to me, Narelle, if you go back, the next step is hospital because of that amnesia event I had. And so I really had to trust the professionals, and I did everything they said to try and get back to work. And after a while, I started to think, because I missed it. Oh, my God. I still do. Yeah. But I thought, why would I go back? I never wanted to go to a psych hospital. That just frightened the life out of me.
Yeah.
That was the wake-up call I needed. I went on work cover and I was so ashamed of the fact that I possibly, because I wouldn't accept it, that I possibly had post-traumatic stress disorder, like a mental illness.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to tell anyone that. I made up all these excuses and I kept it from everyone, probably bar my husband. Looking back, he said there were things that weren't making sense because what I was doing was I was having terrible migraines, but also I had this, my legs would shake in bed of a night to the point where it would wake him up, like they'd shake, really obvious. And I remember I couldn't work out, like my whole body was shaking and I'm thinking, what's going on? And I remember I used to say, oh, you're snoring. So I'd go into the spare room. Yeah. So when I look back, there were all these signs, but I just never put two and two together. But my anger, Gary, like that anger, when I look back, everything the doctor said was right. It was almost like I felt my head was going to burst with anger. Like in the end, I was banging the phone down at work and I was just completely losing control. And I had every time a job would come in, this is right at the end, just before I went to see the doctor, every time a job had come into work, I got to the point where I was avoiding taking the calls because I just thought I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'd get terrible diarrhea, like I spent half the day in the toilet. Again, you can make all the excuses in the world, but looking back, I did ignore the signs.
Yeah, I think a couple of things, and I've seen a lot of people I know in the police go off with stress and in different ways, different forms. What you've described there, that type of thing, I've had guests on here that have described very similar type of things. I think with policing, you're there to serve the public, you're there to help people, you're a protector, protect and serve, that type of thing. I think it's in the police nature that you don't put your hand up ever and say, hey, I need a hand here or I'm not coping. So you got to overcome that barrier. And then it's the pride aspect of it. You don't want to admit that the job's broken you. And sometimes you just need to take a step back. I've hit the wall sometimes and, I had a quick bounce back and I'd go, okay, all right, I was probably out of sorts yesterday, but I'm ready for it now. I had Craig Semple, a good, hard-working detective on the podcast, and he talked about the post-traumatic stress, and he had a career. He was always in the thick of things, different things, and eventually it caught up with him. And not the same way that you talk about, but not dissimilar in that, all of a sudden it's just dawned on me, hey, I'm not ready for this. You put your hand up and actually go see the doctor and they explain what's going on. He made the point, and I think there's a lot to be said for this. He said the people he was seeing, whether a doctor or psychologist or whatever, were saying, the funny thing here is you could have addressed this 10 years ago if you just acknowledged it back then, and you would have been able to return to work quite easily. But you let it build up till it literally broke you and you fell off the cliff. And now the damage has been done and you can't go back there. So maybe that's, and it's not just policing, like there's a lot of careers. I think there's a lot of careers and just society in itself. Everyone seems to be stressed these days for one reason or another. But maybe we've just got to factor that into policing more and, have these recharges. Like, we're working maybe a week off a year to go somewhere just to literally physically and mentally recharge and recalibrate, because I know what you describe as a hard-working detective, and then just when you've got nothing left, you got to go to court, like you just said. And I know those times. I might have been on call all night. I've been up. I haven't slept for 24 hours, and then okay, I've got to put a fresh suit on. I've got to walk in the court, and I've got to have my mind as sharp as possible. And it does, it does wear you down. But I think it's interesting, hearing people like yourself talk about it, because obviously you're not shirking your responsibilities. You got in and had a go your whole career, and you can put your hand up. And I think you touched on that too, that it's good to talk about these type of things.
I think you're talking about having maybe a week off or whatever. How do we manage mental illness within the police? Because there's so much of it. But I think what may have helped me would have been to have a psych 24/7 at every major, like head office. Let's say, in Broadmeadows, in Waverley, but just
it'd probably be cost effective too when you look at the payouts.
And just to have somebody that you can ring and say, gee, I actually dug up a body yesterday and I'm actually not managing too well. But to have them there and then, rather than ring and that, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I just think we should have psychologists or psychiatrists, and probably a psychologist, at every 24-hour station, or at least a couple, so that there is an immediate response. Because, and also maybe mandatory, have once a month, I don't know, have...
I like the idea what you're saying, having someone there. Like, there's times where you've seen something, some of the situations you've described. Of course, it would help if you talked about them, horrendous things that you've seen and done.
Yeah.
We had mandatory psych testing in I think in homicide. I was in there for 20 years. I think I avoided it for about 15 years. And it was mandatory. And then someone said, "Have you been?" I said, "I've never been to other than police shootings where the psych comes out to you at the scene." Yeah. But I'd never been, and there was a sort of attitude about it. We've got to go. We're busy. I have not got time to go talk to this psychologist for an hour. I've got to prepare this brief. I'm on this investigation. Yep. So it was almost like, amongst ourselves, we're just sort of laughing about it, whereas probably if we were more open and more honest, we'd go, well, it's probably not a bad idea, because I think if you have someone to talk to it about it, it potentially could help. And I took a lot away from what Craig Semple said, because he's a tough guy, like it just unbreakable, and he broke, but he acknowledged that if I just did a bit of work on myself back then, I could have circumvented letting it build up to the way it did.
You know, it took me, I'd have to say, 18 months before I actually accepted that I was sick.
Yeah.
I fought it and thinking I could, if I do everything that the professionals say, I'll be able to get back to work and all this sort of stuff. But the game changer for me was going to the Austin Hospital. They had an outpatient a PTSD clinic.
Yeah.
And that took me a while to get into. Isn't that sad? Because there were so many, affected police. But that was a game changer for me, because there was no hiding there. You couldn't hide behind any sort of facade, which we do.
Yeah.
But it was a game changer for me. And just one other thing, I just think it's important to keep an open mind. I remember work cover. I don't have a lot of good things to say about work cover in a lot of ways, but in another way, they realised that I wasn't able to go back to work. They sent me to 12 psychologists or psychiatrists. I think what they were doing was getting somebody to say she can go back to work on a temporary, 2 days a week, whatever. And you know what? Every single one of them said she'll never work again. But I've forgotten my train of thought I was going to. What was I heading to, Gary? See what happens.
I hope you're not. I'm not hoping you're not having one of those lost moments.
I have a lot of them.
Do you realise we're on I Catch Killers? It's a podcast. We're going live.
But anyway, just say, it took me 18 months to really realise how sick I was. Oh, that's right. To keep an open mind. And so I went, work cover sent me to this, they said, we'll send you to a vocational guidance counsellor.
We did that at school.
Hello. And I'm thinking, for fuck's sake,
Yeah.
What are they going to do? So, but anyway, I thought, no, the professionals know, so I'll do what they say.
Yep.
So I went, and again, it's a game changer, because what we did was we sat at a desk, and she said, tell me the things you really like, Narelle. Tell me the things you think you're good at. What are your skills? And you know what? I couldn't think of a skill.
Yeah.
Like, when you're just so sick, and you've done something for so long, you don't realise the skills you have, because they're just taken for granted. We take them for granted, right?
Very much so. Like, my career ended literally overnight, and I'm thinking, what do I do? I catch killers. That's what I did. That was my job. That was my identity and all that. But then I think it's, when you look at policing as a whole, there is so many skill sets that you've got. And I think, we've got to open our minds up. And I joined police as a vocation. That was going to be my career. That was, I didn't want to just have an experience there. I think policing should make itself more readily available to let people go in and out of policing. Like, work for 10 years. I want to see change. I want to do something. I might go work in the building industry for 5 years, and then, that's tough. I'm going to come back to the police, but not come back to the police starting at the academy. I think we could, we'd all benefit from that type of thing.
Yeah. But you don't realise, like, I used to think, and you'd be the same, I'd think, okay, so I can type up a search warrant. I can do an affidavit. I can do an interview. Well, what other world do I need to, I just couldn't think. Anyway, what this lady did was we sat down with what I liked, what I believed my skills were.
Yep.
And then she started to open up my mind about other things that I could do. And it just opened up a whole new world. I did some, we worked out that you may have guessed that I like talking.
Bullshit. That's not right, is it?
No, it's not bullshit. It's right.
All right. Okay.
And I like, I don't know, let's say taking people under the wing and sort of helping them or whatever. Anyway, so we worked out maybe I could do lecturing in investigative techniques. So, but this is 2 years down the track, but I did it.
Yep.
And just opened up a whole new world. And, I lectured at TAFE with investigative skills, and because I realised I had them. And I can remember with the kids, I'd say to them at the end of every lesson, I'd say, if you're, sounds like I was a teacher sort of, if you're really good and you do what I ask, at the end of every lesson, I'll give you a war story.
Yeah. And they'd love that.
They loved it.
Yeah.
They loved it. Anyway, that branched out into a whole lot of different things. And the only other thing I want to add was when I was sick and I was, feeling a bit sorry for myself at home, not working. I've always felt that I had the right sort of personality, and I certainly have the stories, but I was terrible at public speaking or just speaking anything other than a couple of girlfriends.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. But get me in front of a group, and this is before NMIT.
Yeah.
And that's when I went to Toastmasters, and I thought, I want to learn some skills about public speaking to try and get over that fear, that anxiety.
Yeah.
And it unleashed a beast.
Yeah.
And here I am.
And you've gone from this shy, withdrawn person.
I was never shy, and I was never withdrawn.
Okay. You've also stepped into the world of podcasting.
Yeah. Oh, lovely segue that, Gary.
See that? This is I'm getting polished. So I could just immediately just move the story from one to the other. What's the name of your podcast?
The police will understand, but the name of my podcast is Narelle Fraser Interviews, but the short version is NFI.
Okay.
I've always wanted to use that because in policing we all know NFI means, pardon me, no fucking idea.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of friends say, you can't do that. You can't name it that.
Yeah.
I said, you just watch me. So that's when I worked out, what could I have? Narelle Fraser Interviews. So yeah, NFI. But my podcast is really about exploring the human side and impact of crime. And it would be no surprise to you and your listeners that the impact of crime is what I feel so strongly about. And I give people a voice that normally wouldn't have a voice. And that's what I really like. Victims of horrendous crimes that they've never gone to the police about, or they just want to tell their story. So, So as you said the other day, isn't that funny? Two former detectives, now podcasters.
Well, it's different, a different set of skills, but it still is sitting, listening, and what podcasting has taught me, or it's a carry on from what you have to do when you're interviewing suspects. You've got to listen to what they're saying. It's a different form of communication, but I enjoy it. And I see anything that we're doing when two cops are sitting down talking on a podcast. I think it gives a human side to what policing is. So you're not just looking at, that's that cranky detective, or there's that uniformed person, or whatever. Yeah. So I think there's benefits there. People, for whatever reason, find crime fascinating. I quite enjoy it. And if people ask me what I'm doing now, if I'm doing podcasting or writing or whatever, what I'm most proud about is letting people like yourself tell their story on this. Like, I'm allowing people to share their stories. And, it's not just the good guys. We have the bad guys. We've had all sorts on I Catch Killers. So, good luck with it, because it is fun, and you learn as you go along. You embarrass yourself quite a few times, and I'm sure I'll embarrass myself down the track. But I try to always be professional. That was my radio voice, which I haven't really got.
I'm impressed.
Hey, I want to ask this question. Women in policing. I say this, there's been a lot of progress in policing. I talk New South Wales, but I know the culture of other police organisations. By nature, it's a blokey environment. And I sometimes hear girls say, I wouldn't mind joining the police, but what's it like being a policewoman? Tell us your thoughts on women in policing, your experience.
It's pretty tough. It is a man's world, absolutely.
Yep.
But also, I will always go back to, I think, the best combination on a div van is a policeman and a policewoman. I feel like whether this is politically correct or incorrect, I don't know, but I think generally the man is stronger physically. And I think as a female, we have emotional strength, emotional intelligence. And I'm not saying men don't, but I think combined, it's a pretty damn good team.
Let me say I agree with you, Narelle. So if you get into trouble, we're both going down for this. But I think what you said is, it's sensible. It's sensible.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I always like to, have that combination of a female on the strike force I was working on, because they could do stuff that the men couldn't.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough, but I've been in some horrendous situations. I think you've got to accept that there's good and there's bad. Policing isn't all great and fun, and boy, we haven't touched on that, but gee, there's some funny stuff goes on, isn't there?
Yeah.
But I think, I've been sexually assaulted by a colleague. I've had a photo taken of up my skirt where it actually showed my cotton gusset in my pantyhose.
Yeah.
Like that's, and it was put up on the board, this is Fraser's, I don't know, undies or whatever. I've probably, one of the worst things I ever experienced was it was a night shift and I was brand new.
Yep.
And then we were all sitting around having our dinner, like this is at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. Everyone gets called in and we have our dinner. And out come the porno movies. Like, oh, my God. And I can remember.
I would imagine you'd be the only female police officer probably on the,
Absolutely, so, but they're the bad, they're terrible things.
Well, we had a good chat about this the other day when we were talking, and you said, you could make a complaint about that, but you loved your career, and you might then be ostracised or bullied and all that, and we're talking a generation back, like it's changed now. I think there's practices and procedures in there now, but what you were saying, I've heard so many police women that I respect say the same thing. They've made it through, but they had to compromise a little bit and not make an issue. And there's strength in that. Like it gets to the point where you've shown them to be the idiots they are. But you also made the point, and I probably should let you make the point because you wanted to emphasise this when I said, is it all right if we talk about this? That for all the bad, there's what you said. Like I don't want everyone to think it's just misogynistic with the police. There's some really good people there.
Oh, and the good that you do, this is what I mean, you've got to weigh it up. In any career, like, you hear of sexual harassment in every workplace known to man. The police are no different.
Yeah.
And, I've been harassed in other careers as well, like as a secretary, but it's something that it is getting better. And it'd need to, mind you. And I do agree with you, Gary, that if I would have said something, I know my career would have been over. I would have been, it would have completely, it would have finished.
Yeah. And
I didn't want it to finish because I just thought there was so many good things that I could do. And like, who's going to hold a rape victim's hand and take a statement from him if I'm not there? I'm not saying I'm the only one that did it, but that's what I mean. Like
you valued your career and you wanted to progress in the career.
Yes, and the fulfillment that you get from helping people. Yeah, there's some dickheads. There's a few dickheads, but in general, the policemen, and we're talking about policemen. The policemen I worked with were just magnificent men.
Yeah.
And there's always a couple of rotten apples. Police are no different.
Well, I was saying it to you when we're chatting, and I've said it here before. I think in policing, you get exposed to the best people you'll ever meet, inspirational people, and you get also exposed to some of the most, and I'm talking the police, I'm not talking the crooks here. You get some people that are very, very uninspiring, but I want that message to get across when I speak to a successful policewoman like yourself, that women can have a career in policing, and yes, they might be confronted with things, but it's getting better. And I saw, which I was quite pleased, the men in the police were self-regulating the other dickhead men that were harassing women and pulling them aside and saying, that's not on. And so I think the culture is changing, even though
it is.
By the nature of policing, it's a blokey environment, and it probably always will be, but it is getting a bit better.
But also, Gary, if you go into policing and not accepting that it's a blokey environment,
you're going to be a bit naive, aren't you?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I think to myself, you've got to, be pretty tough in some ways and be strong.
Yeah.
And I would never have classed myself as strong, but maybe I am, because it was just like, you know what, that's not going to beat me on.
Well, there's strength in different times, different types of strength. We know the big bloke that's 6'6", that send him in anywhere he can go through the door. But I also seen some women that I call the toughest cops, because they're just mentally tough, and I'm buckling under the pressure, and they're standing there. So strength comes in many ways. Just sort of wrapping it up, would you recommend policing as a career for people like you've been through?
Oh my God, yes.
I love it when ex-cops say that.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's given me, I don't know where to start. Absolutely. But what I would say is that I think just make sure that you check in with a professional, with a psychologist, I don't know, maybe once a month.
Yeah.
But take care of your mental health, because isn't it funny? We take care of our physical health. You've got to be fit and, all the right food groups and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to mental health, there's very few of us that do anything about
put time in to keep that.
Yeah. So I would just say, just to, make sure you attend to your mental health like you do your physical health. And, it's a very, very rewarding, fulfilling, exciting career.
See,
but there are some bags.
And I like that, and I like the fact you look back with fond memories. Despite what you've seen and gone through, you're looking back with fond memories, and it saddens me that all police, and I think across the nation, it's not just New South Wales or Victoria, are struggling to get people in policing. And if you just understood the world that you can see in there, it will open your eyes up, and you will do things that you never thought you could do. And it's sad that messaging isn't getting out, the type of career that policing can be. If you embrace it, you can make a difference, and you can get rewarded in ways that you never expected to be rewarded. And this
Absolutely.
is two of us sitting here. I got run out of the cops, and you went off from the cops because of the damage the policing had done, and we're still sitting here saying we loved every moment of it. So
you're right.
Look, thanks very much. I just want to ask one more quick question that we're starting to ask guests now. Tell me about one incident or person that changed your life, just briefly, something that was significant in your life.
Max Walker.
The cricketer?
Yep.
Yeah.
You know why?
Why?
When I was a secretary, I used to organise a PA, and I used to organise a lot of sales conferences.
Yep.
And one sales conference was down at Gippsland. There was, 100 sales people there, generally all men. And I don't know who organised it, but Max Walker was the guest speaker.
Yep.
And I can still remember thinking, what a great bloke. He got up in front of 100 people or 200, whatever it was. He was funny. He was humble. He was, I think, quite emotional at times. But I reckon at the time, I just thought it's like I'm sitting in my lounge room, having a glass of red with him and just talking. And I just thought, what a skill.
Yeah.
And that was always in the back of my mind, just, wouldn't it be great to to be able to be that comfortable? And now nobody could pay me a bigger compliment than say, you know what, Narelle, it sounds like you're just in my lounge talking to me now. Like,
Well,
what a
it
compliment.
is a good thing, and like Max
Yeah.
Walker, I know him obviously, but never seen him speak live. I remember I read his books. He had a couple of books, and they were hilarious. But I think what you described there is just being genuine, and I think in this world there's so much information floating around. You just want someone that's genuine, no bullshit. This is what happened. Good bits, bad bits. There, we're not perfect. That type of thing. Let me tell you, that's definitely how you come across. I thanked you at the start of the podcast. I told you I wasn't sure whether I'd thank you at the end of the podcast for your service, but it comes across in spades how much passion you had for your job, enjoyment, respect, empathy, all the important stuff, and you're still standing here and having a laugh. So it's well done. Congratulations.
Thanks for having me, Gary. It's been a pleasure.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, Narelle.
Thank you.
Well, Narelle is certainly a bubbly personality, and I think she's got a great personality for policing. And it just came across so abundantly clear, despite the heavy jobs that she was working on and the things she had to face or do, she still cared and had empathy for the victims. And she's a lot of fun. I know policing took its toll on her, but the fact that she still looks back with fond memories, I think she would a real asset to policing, and full credit to her. I enjoyed the chat.